Lindsay, I am so excited to spend this time with you. We were just saying, we've known each other for a number of years, but we haven't actually met in person. It's always a gift to do that. So I wanted to speak to you, Lindsay, because your work as a president of Educating Mindfully, you're doing great work with working with teachers on how to have presence in the classrooms and the spaces in which they teach. And it's something that we talk a lot about here, even though our podcast is the Kids Wellness Podcast, but we do talk about the importance of teacher well-being. But I wanted to shift this idea, kind of reframe it and speak more about teacher presence. We talk a lot about regulation of teachers and self-care and things like this, but I really wanted to focus more on the embodying of presence. So to get started, would you please tell us just briefly, your background, your passion, and your work that you do?
Yes, well, I'm very excited
Mhm.
for this shift and sharing about presence and embodiment in general, because that's the core of everything. So before we really get started in all of that, a little bit about me. I was an educator for over 13 years, varied different roles. So special educator, elementary setting. I was a district-wide climate and social and emotional learning coach. I helped develop that department, and that was from early learning through eighth grade, and also other kinds of roles along the way. And just really grateful for all of those opportunities in the classroom. And a few years ago, I made that transition to really focus on guiding, educating mindfully as the president and director, and just really being connected to this work as we continue to advocate for mindful education, and also recognizing that education is beyond education. The world is our classroom, and our being is our classroom. So with that, I've written children's books, and my company is The Butterfly Within with transformation. So just all kinds of amazing moments to cultivate presence in what we do and embody what we do. So I'll pause there and see if
Yes, that's
anything
perfect.
inspires you there.
Yeah, so let's dig deeper, like looking at the why. So, why do you think children respond more to who we are and how we show up than on the curriculum, the strategies, the techniques?
Hmm. Well, first, we know curriculum doesn't have a heart. We bring that heart there. And, anyone can read something, textbooks can share, AI can share, but the magic is within our presence and being in connection to what we're actually sharing. And children know, everybody knows when we're connected to something and when we're not connected to something. And I think that's the biggest word, I think, in all of that is what is connected and then what is disconnected. And, I continue to bring up in many conversations how disconnection is so strong right now, but we have so many avenues that develop connection. But we have to first be connected to ourselves. And that's where presence is. That's where embodiment is. That's where all of these things that probably came forth in other episodes with self-care and well-being, all of that brings us to that connection within. It brings us to connect in what presence means in our body, in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our breath. Every part of that is what gives us the data and the next steps. And children feel that. In Educating Mindfully, we have our framework. And within that framework, there's right in the center, we have the mountain, which is presence. And we also then, right next to the mountain, have these ripples. And it starts with the self, then staff, students, and society. So that's really how that ripple effect happens. And if children are learning and being with adults that aren't connected to themselves, then this disconnection happens. That's where this teaching happens, but then you bring this content or experience up again, and it's as if it never happened. So that's where sustainability comes in, is when we are fully present and actually sustainable, like a mountain.
Yeah, that reminds me of a few things. Last night I was on a district call, and they were looking at the portraits of a learner here in our district. And the conversations were, what are the activities that you see your child engaged in school? And so many of us talked about that, the characteristics of a classroom, not just as the leader, the teacher is the leader, but it is a community. It's a place of connection, a sense of belonging, of being heard and seen, and a community, so that they go into these spaces together. And it's so much more than the curriculum. The
Hmm.
curriculum is only one piece, but as you say, it's the heart. It's the embodiment of the curriculum in a way that's creative and curious and critical, using critical thinking, right? There's so much more to the story.
Yeah, and we've been really wanting to shift even that word community into an ecosystem.
Mm.
Because within an ecosystem that allows growth, that allows no matter the weather, no matter the storms that might be
Mm.
present and things come and go, but the ecosystem still remains and the ecosystem is interdependent on each other. So that's the community side. But I feel like an ecosystem takes a community even deeper because an ecosystem relies on every aspect of it. All of it connects together and helps it to grow. And so I would encourage the listeners and ourselves to kind of reframe that from expanding the community into an actual ecosystem of growth together.
I love that. And so speaking about that, right? So we're the reality is some of our classrooms or spaces are, messy, as you say, loud, there's stormy weather. And so can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like for an adult to embody or have presence in the day-to-day? Sort of what does that look like
Mm.
in amongst the storm?
Storms. Yes, yes. And I mean, we have storms that are, right, our own internal storms that may be present. We have the classroom experience, especially if there is dysregulation and all of the weather that is within our ecosystem in the classroom. And then the wider weather patterns that are happening. So as adults, like we have the opportunity to create that root system. And I'm going to continue to lean back in on that framework because it allows a way of speaking about all of this. So, in the framework, the core pillars are actually trees. And they're trees for a reason because the trees are the roots. And so, when we are cultivating our presence, the further the roots are, the more it doesn't matter what the wind is. And, even science shows the more wind, the more resilience, the bark on the tree actually grows and it becomes more stable. So when we can actually embrace the wind, embrace the storms, all of that nourishes us in different ways. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just learning and how to allow ourselves the opportunity to support that co-regulation and learning along the way where, an emotion is emotion and how it's expressed might be something that we can support in a more healthy way, but the emotion itself is not wrong. Um, so as a tree, we can provide the tree itself is a provider, right? Because it allows different birds, it allows no matter what's happening to just be. And so we can help nurture that along the way through our presence, through our practice. And, in our framework, we actually have the raindrops as the different practices. So, well-being practices, the trauma supportive practices, the culturally affirming and equitable practices, and our explicit and embedded teaching practices. But that is the rain. And that rain comes however it comes. And we integrate it into the root system of ourselves and our students and into all of those different ripples. So, I think the bottom line is embrace what's there, be present with what's there, notice what communication is happening underneath there, and then help bridge what's next. And through our presence and how we show up, we can cultivate that next way of being of co-regulation.
Right. So let's think about I'm thinking of the listeners who are listening to this say, okay, great, Lindsey, that sounds amazing. And you don't know my classroom. You don't know what I'm up against. You don't know the town that I live in. You're not seeing the students I work with. All of these things that are in reality, you and we both seen it, right? We see it, we honor it, we empathize, all that. So for those folks thinking, okay, great, how? What are some, like you talked about the different in the raindrops, but what are some of your top insights or tips or techniques that are your sort of go-to that someone could take away right now and think, okay, how do I increase my presence?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and there's so many, it depends on the situation, but the biggest thing for me, a go-to would be, where is the breath in the body? Because we know where the breath is in the body gives us a signal. Like, is my breath in my abdomen? Is the diaphragm helping to guide that? Am I fully present in my core? Is the breath staying in my lung space? That tends to be more of a shallow breath. That tends to be more of a um, reactive rather than responsive breath. And then if it's stuck in like my mouth or my nose, or I don't even know where my breath is, that's then giving me again signals, am I in the body or not? So, we talk about the breath a lot and we say take deep breaths, but actually understanding where the breath needs to be in the body when we're responding, especially in crisis or whatever may be, we can actively, consciously bring the breath further down into the core, right? Our trunk of the body. So that's one. Noticing also our feet when we're standing and before we're even approaching a student or a family member or client, whatever, notice your feet. Notice if your left or your right side is further attached to the ground. Notice, does it feel balanced or off balance? And we know our bodies store our stories and our bodies help guide the actions that we take. So if I can be aware of where my feet are and my legs and which side of balance, I can consciously choose to bring balance before I'm responding. I might press one of my feet further into the ground, check again, and then respond. Those are very quick moments too, even in crisis. If you're responding to different behaviors that might be within the classroom, if we are not grounded into our body, meaning if we are not present into our body, the outcome of that response is probably going to be disconnected as well and will probably escalate the behavior. So those I would say are two very quick things that are within the body with responding, but that also starts to move what our voice sounds like, what our tone sounds like, how we're actually walking towards a student. Like, I'm in a crisis right now in my mind. You brought up like there are so many things going on. So I'm picturing a crisis like as a special education teacher responding. So like, yes, we have to move quickly, but there's a difference between that pause, and that pause is that space of like, okay, prepare. And instead of responding in the survival mode of, fight or freeze or flight, I have the opportunity to reclaim that power in that moment. And then I can choose to respond in a regulated space. So that would be what's coming to mind right now.
The power of pause. It's the simple techniques that are the most powerful, isn't it? So what you're speaking about is taking a slow breath and feeling it in your body, taking it that next step. So think about where it is in your body. So it's the mechanics of the breath, right? And then bringing your attention to your feet. The power of the pause. I was listening to this podcast recently, and I just happened to be writing a Mindful Monday about pause, so it's fresh in my mind. But I make reference to this podcast with the Diary of CEO, Stephen Bartlett. He interviews a trial lawyer named Jefferson Fisher. Highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. But he talks about what he's learned in the courtroom of how to speak to difficult people. And it is in a sense mindfulness, because what he's encouraging us to do is to take that deep breath and pause. Because if somebody comes up to you, like you said, it's the response. Because I know we hear it. It's sort of like a throwaway, like it's how you respond, not how you react, right? But how? It's often the question of how. When you have, administrator or a parent or a child in your space, it is hard
Mhm.
to respond, to not react in that moment. But Jefferson Fisher encourages us to take that breath and pause. And then he says, either, did you mean to sound so rude? Or can you repeat that, please? And just being able to calm his voice, exactly what you said, using that presence, using a calm voice, it de-escalates the situation.
Mhm.
Because if that person then has to repeat what they just said or ask a question, so now all of a sudden they're in, they've gone from reptilian to they're wise owl. They have to think of an answer. Did I mean to sound that rude? Right? Did you mean to yell at me? Did you mean to whatever it was? That offers, it's really powerful and the research is very clear. So if you're someone who's looking for, what's that next step? And I've used it with my husband and my daughter.
Yes.
So it works not just in education spaces, but I think that's really powerful what you're saying, Lindsay, is that it's all well and good to look after ourselves, and that's one piece of the puzzle, but you're talking about in the moment
Mhm.
practices, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to build on to that for a moment too, because I was in a conversation even yesterday around sound in general.
Mhm.
Our voice is sound, and there's a lot of research behind sound and frequencies of sound. And so, what happens when you shift your sound, right? You're actually shifting the experience. And when we can also reclaim that base, right? That presence here, and we can speak from that space, then that allows that person to kind of like it almost like makes the brain pause. Like there's this moment of,
Yeah.
oh, right. And then we get to become that mirror too. So I appreciate what you're sharing about, naming it in front of that person. And also just offering, like, what I'm hearing you say,
Hmm.
right? That reflection of a compassionate reflection, because sometimes that person's also coming in at such a higher level, but through sound we have the ability to change an entire experience. um I'm going to go on something a little bit different for a moment here with sound still, and the words we use and what we choose. Have you heard of the book, The Hidden Messages of Water, or The Hidden Messages in Water? Yeah, I've been very curious about this because they have different experiments when you're talking to plants, right? And if you say kind things to a plant, the plant is growing. If you say unkind things to a plant, it really doesn't grow very healthy. Well, there is still an experiment around water crystals. Well, guess what? Plants and humans are mainly water. So, when what I'm trying to mention here is, if we are aware of the words that we're using, how we're using, the tone we're using, like they even played music with the water, and the crystals of the water looked different, as in supportive crystals looked like crystals, and not supportive crystals did not look like crystals. So, when we can be present and aware of what's coming out from us, both in our voice and our being, we are creating those crystals. And what kind of crystals do we want to be creating? Because we're responding in that natural space. Our water within us is responding. So, your share reminded me of that. So I wanted to mention that.
That's beautiful. And I think, if nothing else, you start small. Just start with yourself, even. Like I think about you're saying your breath and your feet. You could also be saying something in your mind or out loud, like I am here now, or I am present, or I am okay, or I love myself, whatever it is, right? You could just be using those words because it's the mind plus the breath and the present awareness of your feet, right? Or use it with your loved ones or with your peer or with so it doesn't have to be like overnight you're doing it all, but can you start small and try this practice, try it on, see if it works, right?
Yes.
Can
Yeah.
you
And even,
share?
Yeah, I mean, like even connecting there, I want to make a little bit of a refinement that it's not just the positive thoughts in the mind of like what you're mentioning too of those affirmations, but really connect the affirmation to what it is that you're doing, make it relevant. In one of my children's books, I share the acronym HEART. H is health. That is, how is my body, breath, emotions, and thoughts in this moment? E is environment. Do I have everything that I'm needing to be successful right now in this environment and whatever it is that I'm going to be doing? HEA, A is affirmation, but that affirmation directly connects to your why in that moment. So that's where I'm connecting here. R is response. So that's great. We can do all those things, but unless we're taking action, it doesn't matter. And then T is transform. So how did either you or the experience transform because you followed your heart? So that's something quick too, where I'm in those moments, I'm like, okay, I'm going to check in with my heart, see where I'm at. So that's that pause that's naturally there. All of those elements are already present in that moment, and then responding from there too. So when literally we can follow our hearts, check in with our hearts, it allows us the guidance that we're needing to become present and embody who we need to be in that moment.
Beautiful. Can you share a story?
A specific one of using it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So let me think back to. So when I was in the classroom, actually, I'm going to go with one when I was a coach. When I was coaching a particular teacher, her classroom, there definitely was a lot of dysregulation. It was a very diverse tapestry. A majority of the students, I want to say, were probably 90% or more, were coming from just backgrounds that did not have as much security within it. So it just was a very dysregulated experience. And the students were bringing all of that into the classroom. And the teacher was really trying to find a way to connect with the students, and just wasn't happening. So when I came to visit the classroom and when I was making the connection with the teacher, just noticing like what is occurring. And we hear this all the time too, but really it was the behaviors that were happening were students just really wanted to feel safe and they wanted to feel the connection. And through that connection, it really was that being seen, heard, and valued. We hear that all the time, but it's so true and so valuable. And not just, okay, I see you, you're a body in my space. No, like, do you see their heart? Do you see who they are? And to actually hear what they're saying and actually value what they're saying. And the teacher wanted the same thing. She wanted to be seen, heard, and valued. So they have the same goal, but we're trying to reach it in different ways. And so when the teacher and I were connecting, I had shared my strategy with her, like the heart strategy with her, little bit at a time. Start small, as you shared. So in the beginning, we were just looking at, okay, let's be aware of what the body's mentioning here. What are the messages that are coming forward? And so she kind of, for about a week, was just noticing how her body was responding. We were looking around the environment. How can we reconfigure the environment, even within a classroom space? Or this could be for anywhere, a therapy space, your home. I'm just giving a classroom experience right now. And guess what? The space was not really conducive for even students being able to look at each other and feel like a community. So when even just the space was able to be adjusted, that started to rebuild some of the relationships. And then noticing as she was teaching, when things would happen, what was the inner dialogue that was happening in her mind? Well, guess what? It was not very supportive. So as we started to create the supportive messaging that she was sharing with herself, the ripples started to occur. She's starting to take action, and there was transformation. And then once she embodied that practice, she was able to start to share that with her class. And then her class started to embody those different things. And then, small steps at a time, because it takes time to rebuild relationships. It takes time for those pieces. But there was progress. And I think that's the important takeaway too, is patience allows for that progress. And yeah, I mean, that would be my offering for our group here, and just seeing like it is possible when we just give it time. You know, we plant seeds, the seed doesn't immediately grow, but things are happening and we have to trust. And we may not be the ones to see the full growth, but we were at least a part of the path. We were at least a part of that moment where we could at least plant that seed through presence, because maybe we were the only one in that child's life or whomever's life to actually show up and be present, for them to see what's possible.
That's a beautiful example, Lindsay. And I think in a world now where so many educators, whether you're in a yoga classroom, a classroom therapy clinic, or wherever, right, educators, people working with children, one of the things that we grapple with right now is this helplessness,
Mm.
right? That we're just one person. How can we possibly make a difference when things are so difficult? And what you're offering there is this is our way. We can't change necessarily the curriculum overnight, right? We can't change how our administrator is in their position, right? We can't change the parents of the children. We can't change the children overnight, right? But what we can change, what we do have control over is our presence, is our showing up, is our like getting creative on how do I restructure the seating plan? How do I get to know the children in a deeper level? Yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes patience and persistence, but there will be progress, as you said, right? And to trust that these little planting seeds, each one of them will blossom. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, when things are growing too, we also get to prune what also grows. And that's for us too. So if things aren't working, that's
Mm.
okay. That allows us to grow and to prune a little bit more. And we know when we prune any plant, it starts to grow even more. So I think another thing to remind ourselves is, if you've been trying something for a while, it's okay to make pivots, and it's okay to not attach to certain things, and take that step back, look and observe and notice the garden. Like,
Yes,
see
right.
what is there, because there are things that are there. And then when you can observe through presence, okay, let's kind of adjust where this might be, and just allow this opportunity to, um, just refine. We can refine along the way and celebrate along the way. I mean, I know whenever I plant something and I start to see it to grow, like I get so excited. And sometimes we miss that moment of even celebrating that. So, I mean, we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot from the garden.
Right. Right. And then it offers an energy shift, right? So it's from you and your tree and your trunk to use your metaphor. And then there's a ripple effect with the energy. And people start to notice. You'll notice, your students will notice, parents, the adults around. So it does have a ripple effect with it energetically as well. So looking at everything we spoke about, it was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Lindsay. For those people listening, what would you say is your kind of parting gift of one doable step that folks can take?
I think we share quite a few. Let me think of another one that would be supportive. You know, I think an action from this conversation, I'm going to actually invite the listeners to get a piece of paper later on today and draw a garden. Draw where you think the garden is, and take it as a moment to validate whatever growth has been there. Maybe partner this with a journaling experience and just name what's there. Because when we do draw, and some of you who may be listening are like, oh gosh, Lindsay, I do not draw. It's okay. That's a
Mm.
belief system that we're going to break, right? Like if we're having that thought, push the boundary there and refine. So then after you reflect on that, I would even then invite, if you are a classroom teacher, Let your students draw that. What do they feel that classroom garden is right now, or even themselves as a flower? Where do they see themselves? Do they see themselves in the ground? Do they see themselves growing? Do they see themselves just as a seed or a full tree? Like, what is it? And I would just really maximize those pieces, and especially if when you're listening to this starts to move into a springtime, like we're recording right now and it's winter, but spring will be
Yeah.
coming. You could do this again and see through presence, because drawing allows us to be present. Seeing where we're at allows us to be present. And over time, if we draw it again in the spring, what does the garden look like? So
I
that
love this so
that would
much.
be what
Yes.
I would
Your
recommend.
nature analogy really, really works for me. Yeah.
Gosh,
Beautiful.
and I
It
didn't know where that was
reminds
going to come
me,
from.
I love it. It reminds me of a classroom I was subbing recently where, I had been in this classroom a number of times, and one of the students was having a really hard time, a really hard years. And he was not in that space for that moment. He was outside. And so I just had a chat with the children during morning meeting, and just openly, because I was able to do that as a sub. The curriculum is so dense, but I just thought this is so important because, as we know, right, children are not ready to learn if there's a discombobulation in the regulation in the room, right? And so I knew that by stopping and having a straight conversation with them, it was going to help us get on to what we need to get onto, right? And so I just asked them straight up, what's working? And I put on the board, what's working, what's not working. And, speaking about like that ecosystem you're relating to, and we had these straight conversations about who they felt they were in the classroom and how they could support the student, how it wasn't fair, and all the things came out. And I was amazed at how honest and forthcoming they spoke from their heart, because they were there. A lot of them were there because they wanted to learn, and their needs were not being met because of one student, right? And so I think that's a beautiful example of, drawing your garden, drawing your ecosystem. Where do I fit in here? What am I contributing? What are my needs? What's the water that I need, or the food, or, the sun, and all those kinds of things. So I think that's a really beautiful example. I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Yes, and it's really accessible too, right? When you
Yeah,
have those
exactly.
conversations, it's really it allows for um, just a more accessible way. So thank you for letting
Yeah.
me share.
Yeah, and it's creative too, and it's curious, and it has them be empowered, and it's something that's relatable and meaningful to them. So, with all that said, how do we find you online, and what's sort of next for you?
Yes, yes. So I'm in a couple different places. So if you'd like to connect with Educating Mindfully, you could visit our website at educatingmindfully.org. If you want to connect further with myself, you can find me at thebutterflywithin.me. I'm on different social media platforms, especially LinkedIn would be the preferred one. You could find me there. But yes, I really look forward to being able to continue to connect and share, and just really grateful for all of the ecosystems together that we get to create and nurture.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Have a great
Appreciate you.
day. Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.